one of the problems, as you all know, with office building is they're very difficult to give form, because basically what they want to be is just slab upon slab upon slab. And we see them all the way around here. You know, you have smaller windows or bigger windows, or you can have round corners or straight corners, and you can have different colours. But it's tremendously limited. The most difficult form, in my opinion, I've been at it for a long time. We wanted to make the building have a greater presence. You wanted to have the building have a greater presence, as I understood it. Part of that was to bring it closer to the road. We have brought it closer. We also felt that if we were going to make it more powerful, more obvious, that the building could be cut more strongly. We therefore have worked very hard on the concept of these gardens, of these sky gardens. And instead of having terraces which look as though they should be occupied, they can be occupied, but we see this as pieces taken right up from going along the Hudson, let's say, and taking bits of the forest, bits of the of what exists there. There could be coniferaces on one, there could be deciduous on another, there could be red and blue on one other. The different trees in different places, different forms. I'm going to wave that around. But that's just in other words, it could be that on each one each on each floor, just as a concept. We have therefore, instead of having the sort of letterbox situation, we have now given that 5 floors basically, and then actually looking on these gardens, forests, sky gardens, if you like. And then, of course, from the outside, it gives a totally different scale. You have a totally different scale than any building, I think, is one can say that I can think of, and certainly in New York. So it becomes very much more your building and the occupier's building. It becomes personalized and more formalized and stronger. And it should change with the seasons.
When what Richard described of this Hudson River School, which were means by which early painters explored the Catskill Mountains and were able to convey the sheer glory and an interpretation of the great American landscape. And it was bringing that to the city and being able to, in painting terms, to be able to represent that as art. Or, in certain instances, is it a way of rebalancing an intervention of landscape which begins to then reassert itself into what is essentially a man-made environment? What you can see from some of these drawings is automatically there's a certain kind of emphasis that's given to these spaces in terms of how the top of the building begins to lose density, even rather than trying to do it in shape. It does it just through losing density. The nature of these is very, very simple office buildings with all of the structure and services just simply expressed. The sense of scale, less about reflected glass, just more about being able to read the basic ingredients of what the building is. What this also did was we reorganized the elevators, as you mentioned. So we looked, that's a relatively easy thing, it's a system diagram. So that's pulled to the north. So, and we'll show you what it's like emerging from this canyon and suddenly emerging and the views that you get of the park, and just a change in the whole nature of the office space that exists on a high level. Also the fact that just doing a few of these rather than a lot of little ones just gives it a bigger impact. It begins to define a scaling and a grain to the building which starts to work at a city level rather than at a more domestic kind of smaller scale level. And then obviously the terrace and then these big interruptions.
But here we took a step further and gave it a stronger form, a clearer form and a scale, a very definite scale. That's the difference.